I remember when I first started the show, one of the first things I wanted to do was have music playing in the background.
Right.
So I put it on my computer playing music. It was real quiet, while we were talking. But when we went back and listened to it, it was picking that up as if it was like blaring. All you could hear was the music. You couldn't hear us talking. So that was scrapped. I had another episode where there's a lot of echoing like this one because I had 2 microphones going. And this is before I'd come across that.
Right.
So I did the whole show. And it was unusable because it was like just a constant echo. And I tried using some software to kind of clean it up and wasn't. And then one episode, I went like halfway through with no sound. Someone messaged me, was like, "We can't hear you because there was like no mic on." Yeah. So we had a great show and like there was no sound. So I pretty much have hit like every issue there can over the years. It's like my 3rd year doing the show, but I've gotten better. There's even one year, one time I wanted to have the chats up, right? So I had my laptop over here and I went to YouTube on it and I was recording over here. But the problem was because I was downstream here and upstream there, it was a bandwidth issue. So it ended up coming up all choppy. It was terrible. So now I use my phone to open up the chat and see that. So it's things that you learn. So kind of segue back into what we were talking about. This is some of the things you learn when you're an entrepreneur. So, and that's one of the reasons why I appreciate when I come across, guys that are men and women that are like stretching their legs out, trying to like create their own brand. I mean, it is a big world out there.
Yeah.
And cigars is a very competitive field with a lot of established names. Like I was saying with bourbons and stuff, there's a lot of established names from hundreds of years. So now you've got, guys that are passionate about cigars or bourbons coming out their own, and they're just really having to do, I would say, at least 3 times the work.
Yeah, people
to get it out there.
People make the statement that you work your 9 to 5 to pay for your 5 to 9. And when you work your 5 to 9, you use that to pay for your job that you do 365 days a year, 24/7.
Yep.
Right? And so I learned that because I do have a full-time job, but I work more for my company than I do anything else. Right? And I'm asleep, and I wake up like, As a matter of fact,
it's who you are.
These shirts. So this is one of the shirts that I don't know if you can see, but this is one of the shirts that I have. It says, this is for the bishop. It says, "Bishops don't take L's. We slide." If you know anything about chess, the bishops go diagonal. So this shirt, I made one for each of the cigars. But this shirt, I was sitting in my room, and all of a sudden I'm like, I just got an idea. Just started coming up with different designs for different shirts that look totally different to give the cigars a little bit of an identity.
Right.
And it went from making the designs to trying to find somewhere to get them printed. It's a lifelong situation, but I love it though. I love it because it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me pushing ever forward. So I'm excited about it. I really am.
I remember back when I first started back in the late 90s, it wasn't like easy as it is now to print business cards like the Vista print online and going to Kinko's online.
Right.
So I used to print my my own business cards on cardstock and then actually slice each sheet and turn it, slice, and make my own business cards. And it was kind of hilarious because they were like weird angled. They weren't always like 100%, cut right. So sometimes I'd be handing people like, it was like a 3-year-old cut it, and I'd make my own door handles and stuff. I mean, you gotta put in the work,
Right.
And I'm in the same boat as you. I work a full-time job, I love to write and stuff, but it really comes as soon as I clock out at work. I clock in immediately into my passion,
Absolutely.
which is my writing, and I do, and I mix it up with some animation stuff. So it's definitely anybody watching this is an entrepreneur. You know how it is. It's 24/7. There's no off switch.
Yeah.
You can sit in there, have a great idea, jot it down, and then that's all you can think about until you get home and you get it done. So that's pretty awesome. So now, have you had a chance to have it in any places? Or are you still working on like trying to find some humidors to stock up in, or is that something like I don't know what the process is? Like you've already got cases, you got cigars. I mean, I've tried it; they're great. Like what's the next step?
So for me, when I first began, I wasn't really looking at getting into the brick and mortars.
Okay.
I really just wanted to be an online store and house everything and just ship them out that way. But then I started getting requests like, hey, when they gonna be here? When they gonna be here? And I'm like, that makes sense because I'm not everywhere. Right. And so I started looking at brick and mortars to get them in. B&G's was the first ever lounge that took one of my cigars. This is before I had the Bishop. I only had the Night, and B&G's put it in their lounge, and it was one of those. I guess you could say you learn from mistakes type thing, right? Because it was the first cigar ever. I'm new to the industry, didn't really know what it took to push that particular brand.
I feel some feedback coming on.
So what I did was I decided. That trial went through, and then I started the Bishop, and I went a total different route. So what I did with the Night, I didn't do with the Bishop. Right. Like with the Bishop, if you see my Instagram, which is at Empire Cigar Co.
And all this is going to be in the description too. Actually, it already is. So check it out.
It's on my Instagram. You see a lot of more reels and pictures and stuff like that with the Bishop and the Night. I didn't do that with the Night. I might have taken one or two pictures and said, hey, listen, here's the Night, and that was it. Everything was word of mouth. But then the more I realized that technology played a part in getting the word out, I started utilizing technology more. So it's a trial and error, and I think I've learned the lessons that kind of put me under a little bit. I feel like we're coming back. But I know that we're coming back. Like I participated in festivals, and the main thing about the cigar industry is getting your name out there, because most people tend to smoke what they're used to smoking, and so if they don't know who you are, 9 times out of 10 they're not gonna buy it. Right. And so I've been a part of, like I said, the BCA festivals, which is the Boutique Cigar Association festivals. I've been a part of those. Been a part of other little small events in Memphis, Tennessee, and Holly Springs, Mississippi, Columbus, Indiana. So I've moved around a little bit in that regard. Some here in Dayton. So for the most part, we are looking now to expand to other areas to get our cigars in those lounges. We are in conversation right now with Cleveland. So I'll be in some lounges in Cleveland coming soon, as well as Columbus. And I'm also in a lounge in Mississippi. I have a brand ambassador in the South, so he deals with Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, that area. While I'm working up here in the Midwest. We're expanding, and the idea is to be that solid member of your family, in your house. I want the cigars to be there whenever you decide, hey, you know what? Let's have a smoke on it, and I'm gonna open one of these boxes and pull out a Night or a Bishop. So that's kind of what we are.
I tell you what, it's kind of an exciting time too, because I remember I've always loved writing, but I couldn't get into writing early on because you had to go through traditional publishers, and there was a lot of rejection, a lot of we're probably at the mercy of publishers. This self-publishing came along, but it was still expensive. The places you got to go through would charge a lot of money and stuff. And now I'm able to self-publish fairly inexpensively for free, even. As long as I like to write, I can do my own editing and publish them, and not have to pay anything. So one thing I've kind of noticed, especially since like COVID 2020, is that shift in individuals wanting to become entrepreneurs, wanting to go out and do their art, make their own brands, but 2, a shift in society that we've kind of gotten away from wanting to do the mainstreams. It went, we're going away from necessarily doing the big brands and doing the breweries. We're looking for I buy pretty much only local art. There's a thing. There's like a thing going on with in the world, and especially in America right now, where people are really seeking out entrepreneurs because they want to try the next thing. They're tired of something that's been established, has been around, for 100 years. Now they're looking for. So when I go to a cigar shop, I look for the new brands. I look for the maybe the ones they haven't carried before. But I like going, like B&G's usually pretty good with having different vendors coming in and coming across somebody and hearing the story. I'm out of Cincinnati. We just started a cigar company, a few years ago. It's just growing, and it's like people want. There's actually like a new type of person coming out
right.
that's specifically looking for this. You know, specifically looking for, I want to try the next something that nobody else has tried or very few people have tried, and I want to get something that when the people come over, it's like, oh yeah, this Empire, Cigar Company cigars, like you can't get this everywhere.
Right.
You know, there's only like one guy you can get it from. You know,
so with that,
the story behind it.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
But no, we are actually planning to be exclusively at Beckles Humidor.
That'd be really nice.
And so you can only get it at that lounge.
Right.
And some people are like, well, you're cutting your feet off. I'm like, I don't think that I am, because I believe in my brand, right? And my brand is exceptional. And I think that any of you guys who are watching, if you had the opportunity to smoke, you would think the same thing. And so to be able to not only bring light to my company, but also bring light to a phenomenal cigar lounge, as in Beckles Humidor, I think it's a win-win on both ends.
I think it's a very good pair. They have that the entrepreneur personality themselves.
Right.
You know, if you ever been to Beckles, where I go like every week, I mean it's a lovely lounge. You know, they have to be very selective in their cigars because it's not a big lounge, so they're selective and only bringing big brands. But even like Patrick Beckel has his own brand of cigars in there with his own poses in there. He has networking nights where people come in from all different businesses and they kind of network and stuff. And they even carry my books there, just kind of put them on the shelf, because they're just supportive of all their customers that come to the door. So I think that honestly, that's a perfect pairing for you. Trying to get your brand out there and stuff. They have memberships, so they have members that come in.
Right.
They're very unique humidor. The way they run their business plan is very unique. It's very upscale, so to speak. So to like build a relationship with somebody who really supports entrepreneurs and wants to see you succeed, but also there's a certain expectation people who go to Beckles for certain levels of cigars too, and I think that's going to be really good for you, and I think it's going to be good for us too, because now when I walk in there, it's like I'll be able to pick up know I can pick up an Empire cigar, and if I say, hey, somebody really likes it, or I put it in my pack and take them with me, like, hey, where'd you get that from? Like, well, you can get them online and go to Beckles. There's really nowhere else to kind of go, and it kind of adds a little bit of exclusivity to it, which is kind of nice.
Exactly.
So how does how online does it work? I mean, and can anyone in the country order it, or do you have to be pretty much really from Ohio, or
no?
I don't know how it works.
We ship anywhere.
Very nice.
We ship anywhere. On our website, you put in your order, and I don't know if you, if any of you, if you choose to pay Cash App, it's very well as possible. On my website, it'll give you that information. But if you put an order in, then we'll send an invoice. People say, well, why can't you just buy from the site?
Right.
Well, I'm a little iffy about that, because I know a lot of sites that get hacked. I don't want that problem. So what I do is, when you put your order in, then we send you an invoice so that you can pay at your leisure, and not based on not in the back of your head, I wanted my money going to where it needs to go.
Right.
With the invoice, you know exactly where it's going. So we send an invoice, and you can pay it that way, or you can pay a Cash App, and once the Cash App comes, your order's in the mail next day.
Very nice.
You can let us know on Instagram. You can send us a message on Facebook. Either way, we're trying to benefit the customer. So whatever is easier for you, the customer, we're game to assist. Anyone in Dayton, we drop off. You can pick up. We ship. It just depends on what you want to do as a customer. So check us out on our website. Check us out on Instagram. Share it. Follow us. All of that. Like, it's so much to do, but it's so little effort. If that makes sense.
A lot of you out there, that you support Kickstarters and stuff. This is another opportunity, different charities and stuff. This is a good opportunity to support an upcoming cigar company. This you may be somewhere where you may not be near a cigar shop, or you may be new to get into smoking cigars and stuff. This could be your first brand. This could be something that you start up with, and kind of grow with your company.
Absolutely.
You know, and build that relationship. And communicating with him to get him on the show and stuff was very easy. He's very communicative. You know, it's like, well, I think we do email, but I think we initially messaged on Instagram.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so it's very good when you find a company that's that responsive and all these different social medias. You know, it's almost like, you know, meeting a favorite author, someone who will talk to you all the time. You know, it's like find a company that, you know, that you have somebody on the other end to talk to you and work with you and get you, you know, get that personable. I mean, you go to a lot of these other websites and buy stuff. You're just a number, you know.
Yeah.
You're just, you know, you buy it and you ship it. And you don't even know who's on the other end packing it up. Here you can't, you know, you know who you'll be talking to.
And I'm answering everything. I'm a one-man show. I do it all. So it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. But at the end of the day, when I get a card back in the mail that says thank you for your customer service, that means more to me than you buying my cigars. That means you felt a need to send me a card back that says thank you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that speaks volumes. You know what I'm saying? I believe that Empire Cigar Company, we focus more on our customer service than we do anything else, because the customer service can build your brand or break it.
Absolutely. Especially today's environment, people have very high expectations for what they expect. Absolutely. I think people have gotten tired of the bigger businesses that just want their money, but there's it makes you feel like that's all they want. Yeah, there's no relationship. So I think now in any business that you're in, one of the biggest things you try to foster through social media is really trying to foster those relationships, you know, because it's your fan base, you know, that's going to take you to the next level, you know. And even as a writer, I understand that. It's like what writers that can make a living writing are the ones that have a good fan base.
Right.
Us entrepreneurs, those people that are starting from the ground up, we understand that. And I think a lot of these businesses that either A, grew too fast, or B, been around too long, have lost sight of that. And I think that's why a lot of people are starting to turn more to more locals, smaller businesses, because they get that. Yeah. They're not used to that. You know, they're not used to that that kind of like going in and actually having somebody like, hi. That's not just being paid to fake smile at you, but someone who's actually excited to see you. Like, if I get a new YouTube subscriber, I'm like jumping up and down, you know, because I've only got, you know, like 160, you know, up until like 3 days ago, I only have 50, you know. For like years, I only had like 26, you know. So each time I pick up new subscribers and stuff, I'm jumping up and down because as a young startup and entrepreneur and stuff like that, you get excited about that build. The ones that have millions of subscribers, you click subscribe, you're not even going to notice, you know.
You lose sight of it.
Right. So it's really a good opportunity to kind of, you know, jump on board with some of these smaller entrepreneurs. That's why I like to have them on my show, young artists, entrepreneurs, stuff like that, because they're the ones that really appreciate pretty much, one, coming on like a no-name show, but two, meeting into people. I mean, shaking hands, getting to know people. I mean, I met him at Beckles. We've talked a few times. He goes around, just talks to everybody. It's not just business. Just talk to people, you know. And then, you know, people get to know him and like, oh, man, you know what? It's like, I like you. That means I know I'm going to like your cigars.
Right.
That's kind of what we shoot for. So, again, thank you so much. You ready to get ready to the story?
I'm ready, man.
All right. So I got all of his information below. So take a look in the description. I've got his website, his Instagram, and Facebook. So you can take a look at all of his stuff and take a look at his different cigars that he has, and you know, just support small business. So we're gonna take a small break, and then we're gonna come back. He's gonna help me read my short story, and then you know, we're gonna see what kind of laughs we can get out of it. Actually, it's not too many laughs. It's a stalker story, but you know, it's not that funny. But you know, we'll see. We probably can make it funny.
Right.
All right, we'll be right back right after this commercial. All right, we are back, and that was the trailer for my first mystery novel, Sins of the Father. So make sure you go and check that out too. That came out in 2015. I was one of those guys that when I wrote my book, it took me 10 years to write. You know, I pretty much handwritten it because I couldn't type that fast when I was working on it, and it took me 10 years. I was like Field of Dreams. If you write it, they will come.
Yeah.
I wrote it, published it, and like nothing, like no sales. I started to pick up more now. It's kind of like a lot through my social media and stuff, but I did at the time. You know, I didn't have. You know, it was like looking around, like I thought it'd be the next like big thing. It's like, oh, a book published, come read it. So, a little disappointed when it didn't really grow, but you know, it's one of those things where you can't just. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the time. You have to build up. So I actually started writing short stories, and the short stories actually became a podcast. You know, and the main reason I started writing short stories really was just to pick up some new fans. You know, it's like I got this book, but I got no one to sell it to, and then I started realizing when I started looking at other writers that were making money selling books, they had like 50, 60 books out. You know, I'm like. And then it kind of like was an epiphany because then I realized that, wait a minute, if somebody buys my book and they like my book, and that's like the only thing that I have, they're going to move on to the next author. Yeah. So I started with the compilation books on every time I wrote 25 short stories, put them in there. And then now I'm actually moving over to novellas, which I'm going back and doing my short stories, but I'm expanding them into full-length novella type books, 20,000 words as opposed to 2,000 words. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Eventually, I like to get back into novel writing. I wrote my novel Black Knight, which is the first book in a trilogy, years ago, and I wrote it under a year. But honestly, it's like now that it's written, it's hard for me to go back. It's a fantasy book, and there's world building, and there's so many good fantasy books out there and stuff that it's just like I've kind of like put it to the side. It's hard for me to like once I write a book to go back and get passionate about editing it. So the shorter books are a little bit easier to do that. So I'm going to be doing this one is called I Must Have Her. I think it's one of the first darker ones that I wrote as far as like this kind of mentality, and it's probably thanks to that TV show You probably came out around the same time. Okay. So when I started watching that, I'm like, I make a pretty good book. So that's probably where this kind of like came from. But you're going to do the narration, so he's going to be doing the voices. I'm sorry, you're going to be doing the voices. Yeah. I'm going to be doing the narration. So, all right, let's get into it. All right. Edward took out his phone. He had to take a picture of her before she walked off. Once he had it, he crossed the street and joined her at the bus stop. She gave him a quick smile and then looked away, waiting for the bus. He wanted to talk to her, but he was too shy. The bus arrived, and they both boarded.
Lucky I left for the store early today,
he thought, smiling as he sat alone in his seat, staring at the woman a few rows up, memorizing every detail he could. As he got off the bus at the stop in front of the grocery store, he gave her a passing glance, but she was looking at something on her phone. Though he was disappointed, he couldn't blame her, since she didn't know him yet. Throughout the whole day, he replayed that smile she had given him over and over through his mind. While at first it appeared that it was just a friendly smile, the more he replayed that moment, the more he focused on her eyes. Her eyes told the truth. It wasn't just a friendly smile. It was a come-hither smile. He now knew she was interested in him. Even though he was too shy to approach her himself, he also knew that women loved when a man knew everything about her and could impress her with how much they knew. Since he didn't know her name, he knew he was going to have to start off the old-fashioned way, following her and taking notes. You know, when I write these stories, I kind of feel like, man, now this is not me. I'm envisioning in my head as a writer, you know, what he's doing. I'm like, God, I really get some detail on some of these. Oh, my God. The next day, as he watched her at the bus stop, he took out a notepad. It's like turning into like a step-by-step on how to stalk someone. The next day, as he watched her at the bus stop, he took out a notepad and wrote down what time it was.
Looks like she boards at the same time every morning,
he thought.
She must live around the area. I'll come back later to see where she lives.
When he figured it must be getting close to the time that she would be arriving home, he walked to the park within sight of the bus stop, and his heart skipped a beat when he saw her step off the bus. He casually got up and walked parallel to her through the park. He got excited when he saw her walk into an apartment complex.
I can't believe I've lived this close to an angel and never knew it,
he thought. Though he knew where she lived, he wanted to learn everything he could about her. The following day, he followed her on the bus and sat a few rows behind her. He wasn't ready to talk to her yet, but wanted to be able to watch her without drawing attention to himself. A few years prior, he had been in a car accident that left him partially disabled. The settlement allowed him to live a modest lifestyle, never having to work again. You know what they say about idle hands? Yeah. As he watched her, he berated himself for not having thought of meeting women this way sooner. Because of his disability, he found it difficult to go out to bars to meet women, and the fact that his mother had taught him women that hung out in bars were all whores, he decided that was not the best way to be a soulmate. You know, I gotta tell you, as a writer, and I write very little profanity in my books, although I feel like they're necessary.
Yeah.
I grew up in a Pentecostal home. You know, okay. It's like my mom. I've read a couple of these stories to her, and she's like, "Son, whore is not a good word. You do not talk about a woman like that." I'm like, "Mom, it's a story.
Right.
I don't think she's a whore. He thinks she's a whore. But she's you. No, this is Edward. This is not me."
Right.
So sometimes I'm even reading, I can hear when I say a bad word or have a bad word in a short story. I can hear my mom in the back of my head
yeah.
Son.
Right.
He smiled as he remembered how wise his mother had always been. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't know the first thing about women. He knew this woman was a soulmate. So he knew that if he wanted to win her over, he would have to be patient. The bus came to a stop, and he watched as she got up from her seat and made her way off the bus. He took out his notebook and wrote down the stop she got off at. Tomorrow, he would pick up where he left off at the stop. The next day, he waited close to the bus stop she had gotten off the day before. He pulled out his phone and began snapping pictures as she stepped off the bus. Fortunately, she began walking away from where he was standing. He didn't want her to notice him standing there. He wasn't ready to talk to her, though he knew she would be very happy if she had seen him. He walked down. He began to walk after her, snapping pictures every so often. He wanted to capture every detail of her. She walked into an office building where she worked. He knew he couldn't follow her without drawing attention, so he instead took the time to walk around and sightsee.
She's going to be so impressed at how much work I put into getting to know her,
he thought. He couldn't wait for the day he was able to tell her the story, how he had learned so much about her. He imagined this would be a great love story they could tell their kids someday. Now that he knew where she worked and lived, he could start to search for more information online about her. He couldn't wait to impress her with how much he had learned about her and explain to her how he did it. While he made his plans, he fantasized about what their sex life would be like. Sorry, Mom. He had never had sex before. Okay. Sorry, Edward. I should have. You're not a very complex character apparently. But he had seen enough porn to know what to expect. Now that it's been years since I wrote this. I sometimes forget. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I wrote that. Jesus. Now that he had found his soulmate, he spent that night watching even more, learning everything he could about what women expected. While the videos he watched were informative, he found that he got bored easily with the basic ways to do it and began delving deeper into more aggressive ways of having sex. The next day, he watched as she boarded the bus to go to work. When it was out of sight, he casually walked to the apartment complex to see what security measures were in place. The front entrance was locked. It looked like you had to either have a key or pay someone on the mounted intercom to have them buzz you in. He had learned a trick from a TV show on how to get someone to buzz you in. And this is true. I saw this on a TV show.
Yeah.
Just press all the buttons and hope someone was casual enough about letting people in or expecting someone. Out of all the choices, he hoped at least one person would let him in. And here's a little fun fact. The show that I saw it on was The Big Bang Theory.
Okay.
It was like episode 1 when they had to go to this place and they were trying to figure out how to get in.
Uh-huh.
And they couldn't figure it out. So these Girl Scouts came up and started pushing all the buttons and they were buzzed in. I'm like, that's probably a pretty good way to get into one of these buildings. Right. So I was like, yeah, kind of fit that in there. He didn't want to go in just yet, though. He knew it would be hard for him to remain inconspicuous for 8 hours. Instead, he walked back to the park until just before he knew she would be returning from work. When he felt the time was right, he walked to the apartment complex and slid his hands down all the apartment buttons, causing a series of buzzes. Almost immediately after he pushed all of them, he heard a return buzz and a click at the door. He opened it and walked inside. He cautiously walked the main floor, hoping to see a common laundry room that he could stay in until she returned. He even brought a bag of dirty clothes that he would show if someone looked at him suspiciously. Not long after he settled himself into the laundry room, he looked at his watch and knew she would be arriving home at any moment. Sure enough, a few minutes later, he heard the front door of the complex open. He peeked his head outside just far enough to see, but remained mostly unseen himself. He saw her walk to the elevator, press her floor button, and then step on.
She lives on the 3rd floor,
he noticed. When the doors closed, he quickly walked to the emergency stairs and ran up as fast as he could. At the top, he slowly opened the stairwell door and carefully looked out, watching as she entered the apartment. He wrote down what apartment she went into and closed the stairwell door. He gathered the bag of clothes that he had left in the laundry room and walked back out the front door. He contemplated the various options he had. He thought of breaking into her apartment, though he didn't know how to pick locks. Maybe he would just surprise her at the door with flowers. Knowing it would take longer for him to learn how to pick locks than he wanted to wait, he decided to be a hopeless romantic he knew women loved. The rest of that night and the next day, while she was at work, he spent looking online for everything he could learn about her. He searched the company directory and found her picture. Her name was Laura, and she worked in HR. Using her name, he was able to find her on social media. I'm in cybersecurity, so some of this kind of like bleeds out into this. Oh no, this is why you should protect yourself online, people.
Right.
Her accounts were set to private, but he was still able to find out just enough to continue his search. By the time he was done, he knew where she had gone to school, who she worked with, and who some of her friends were. Sticky hands. There we go. He felt confident that when she saw him holding the flowers, he revealed all he learned about her in such a short time, her heart would melt and she would be his. His phone alarm went off and he realized he only had a short time to buy flowers, get inside the apartment complex, and be in her apartment before she arrived. At the appointed time, he found himself hidden once again in the stairwell waiting. The elevator ding announced her arrival and he saw her walk to the door. To be a complete surprise, he waited until her back was to him as she unlocked the door. When Laura turned to close the door, she found herself looking at a stranger holding a bouquet of flowers. She smiled as she saw him. Her ex-boyfriend Tom must have sent them to make up for the way he had been treated her. Giggling a little, she said,
"Oh, hi, you shocked me."
Edward just stood there staring at her, his heart racing.
She does remember me,
he thought. Then confusion filled him when she asked,
Are those from Tom Perkins?
I might have forgot to highlight some of these things. He didn't know how to answer, and then he replied,
They're for me.
It was her turn to be confused.
Do I know you?
She asked, vaguely remembering him from somewhere.
I'm Edward,
he said, surprised she didn't recognize him.
Thank you,
she said hesitantly. She reached out and cautiously took the flowers. As nervousness filled her, she said,
I have some work I have to finish up on,
and tried to close the door. Edward's mom had warned him about women, and he now saw why. All women, except his mother, were manipulative bitches who toyed with men's hearts. I don't think that now. I was going through a hard time at the time, I think. Very complex individual. Laura watched as his side smile turned into a menacing one, and she instinctively tensed up. Without notice, he pushed her into the apartment, closed the door, and began to scream. Oh, you get to say this one.
Bitch.
At her. He began to repeatedly punch her in the face. Only fair we get to share the love a little bit. She blacked out. Seeing that she was unconscious, he slowly got off of her. After he caught his breath, he dragged her through the apartment to her bedroom. She woke up to a pounding headache and feeling disoriented. She found that she could only see out of one eye, and it took her a moment to realize that she was in her own bedroom. Her arms ached, and she quickly saw that her wrists and ankles were tied to the bed. She tried to scream, but she was gagged and only a muffled sound escaped her. Across the room, she saw Edward sitting at the chair watching her. He seemed nervous and angry. Hoping to calm him enough to release her, she pleaded to him with her eyes and moans. He seemed to notice and perked up when he saw that she was no longer struggling.
I'm sorry we had to meet this way, but you didn't seem to recognize me. And I know that can't be the case,
he said.
We had a connection. I know it.
She continued to just listen, gathering as much as she could so she could hopefully play along until he untied her.
I followed you and learned all I could about you,
he continued.
I knew the moment you smiled at me, I had to have you, and I know you felt it too.
She nodded, hoping he would buy it. He did. He walked over to her side.
Now if I take the gag off, do you promise not to scream?
He asked. She nodded. He took the gag off, ready to knock her back out if she tried to scream. She gasped but didn't scream. Instead, to his pleasant surprise, he smiled and said,
Thank you.
He smiled back and moved his chair next to her. She continued to try to show she was on his side, and she continued to say,
Of course I remember you. Why didn't you say hi sooner? You didn't have to go through all of this just for me.
Inside, she was mentally throwing up, but she knew she had to play her part until she was free.
I wanted to do it right,
he said.
Well, You just caught me a little off guard,
she said.
I had a rough day at work.
He nodded in understanding. She looked at him and then at her wrist.
You think you can let me up now? So we can get to know each other better?
She asked as politely as she could. It was me. He wanted to believe her, but his mom had always told him not to trust women. Got a little Norman Bates on everybody.
But this is different,
he thought, trying to justify freeing her.
She's my soulmate, so I know she wouldn't trick me. We're meant to be.
Laura could see his conflict, but relaxed a little when he hesitantly reached over and untied one of her wrists. She thanked him with a smile, and smiling himself, he walked to the other side of the bed and untied her other wrist. She rubbed her wrist but gave no indication she wanted to escape. Then she nodded to her ankles.
Please,
she asked.
Oh,
he replied.
Of course.
She groaned with relief once both her ankles were untied.
How about we go to the other room and get to know each other better? She said. I want to know everything about you.
While he was filled with joy, she gathered her strength. She needed to be strong enough when the time came. He seemed to completely believe her love for him and casually started to walk away towards the living room. When he arrived at the living room, he turned to face her, but instead found himself staring down the barrel of a gun she had taken out of her nightstand.
What are you doing, my love?
He asked.
Well, my love,
she replied sarcastically.
I'm going to call the police while you sit there quietly. You see, I just got the one crazy relationship so bad I had to buy a gun and learn how to use it. I even learned some kickboxing so I wouldn't try anything until the police arrived. But we're meant to be together,
he pleaded, confusion and anger swelling up.
No,
she replied.
We're not.
Most would have froze with shock when Edward jumped, but after his initial attack at her door and waking up tied to her bed, she was past the damsel in distress phase. She calmly fired 2 shots into his chest, dropping him dead. She took a moment to pleasantly visualize that it had been Tom she had sought, bringing a smile to her face, and then she walked to the kitchen to call the police.
I need a drink,
she said out loud, and her second glass of wine had thoroughly calmed her by the time they arrived. You know, I was like thinking while I was reading this, is that when you're a writer and you're writing a story, you kind of come to an impasse. Like, how do you want it to end? Do you want it to be a happy ending, or do you want it to be like a sad ending? You know,
or a twist,
or some kind of plot twist. And I remember, I think a few stories before this, like the endings weren't all that like pleasant. Like, you know, like it's much easier to write, you know, where it just ends with everybody dead.
Right.
You know,
right.
Reservoir Dog style. But I think but mostly through this, like, you know what? I want to have a happier ending. I want to give her a chance to, you know, to live and kind of make her the kind of the heroine in this, of her own story. So I was remembering that when I was thinking, even though it's been years ago since I wrote it, it's like, you know what? It's like, I think this way I'm going to go with a happier ending as opposed to, you know, something bad. And also when I'm writing like a 2,000 word story, I got to like wrap it up, you know, quickly. Yeah. But I also got to have it to make sense. It's only 2,000 words, so it's easy some stories when you start writing, it's very difficult to like kind of figure out which way you want to go. But some stories come out so easily, and I write so much about it before I realize I'm only 300 words out. I'm like, crap, I got 300 words or so to kind of wrap this up, and it's got to make sense. So I think for this one, it's just like, okay, I'm almost done with words. I'm just gonna have him jump at her. 2 rounds in the chest. Story over. Cheers.
Right.
So we're gonna go take a quick break real quick. When we come back, we're gonna just take a few more words from Jeremy, and then we'll bid you all good night. So just stick around for a couple more minutes, and then we'll be right back. All right. Thank you for sticking around. That was a trailer for my new novella, Generational Killers. Before we head out, I do just want to remind you that my new novella, I do have a couple of books that are now out. I do have Short Stories from the Mind of Madman, Volume 3, that just came out, I think, like a couple months ago. And then just a few weeks later, I have my first novella that came out. Generational Killers is actually the first story I wrote back in 2017, short story, and I expanded it into a full novella, 20,000 words, and these are 25 more short stories, so you can definitely check out volumes 1, 2, and 3, 75 short stories of mine, and then of course, you might hand me a copy of the first book there.
This one?
Yep. And then of course, I have my first and only novel so far, mystery novel, Sins of the Fall. Is the first one I came out with back in 2015. That's the first trailer you saw. So please check out my website. Take a look. I also have some merch on there, some t-shirts. I got a new Halloween collection that's out there. And Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
I have all of his stuff in the description below, so make sure you check out his website. Take him out on all social media, on Instagram and Facebook, and was there another one?
So it's Facebook,
the website, Facebook,
website,
and Instagram. Yeah, make sure you follow him on all those, and just drop a line and say, hey, I saw you on the show, and I'd like to check out your cigars sometimes. And if you're ever in the area of Beckles, make sure you go in there and say, hey, I heard you guys are carrying Empire Cigars, or Jeremy comes around here, is like, where I get the stuff.
Yeah.
Plus you can go online and buy it. So thank you again for coming on, help me read my story. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. Those of you that watch live. Part of the live chat, and then if you're watching this later on, please take a moment to like and subscribe to this video. Subscribe to my channel. It goes a long way. Like I said, every new subscriber just makes my day, because it lets me know, like, hey, when I ever come out with a new podcast or do a new show, I got somebody out there that that watches and enjoys it. So it's a good way to let me know that people are seeing this. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, and then we will see you again next time. Cheers.
See you later, guys.